I absolutely think CMOs play a tremendous role in their companies around AI. And there's some natural reasons why CMOs have a prime seat in the dialogue in the C suite. AI is a natural extension of a digital and data transformation that CMOs have been leading for years.
Hi, I'm Greg Stewart, CEO of MMA Global, the international nonprofit trade association for CMOs who are focused on architecting a new future of marketing.
I'm Rex Briggs, an author, market researcher, measurement inventor, and entrepreneur.
This is one of my very favorite people in the whole world, Janet Balis, a managing partner at EY. Runs the marketing practice. She's marketing practice leader over there, is truly one of the, listen, if anybody has their pulse on what CMOs are struggling with, Janet's going to be that person. And just to be clear, it's not just pulse, then she's got to come up with answers for that. So Janet, I want to welcome you to the show today.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And maybe not just struggling with, maybe thriving at as well, because some CMOs are actually thriving. Let's see the glass half full as well.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Well, okay. Those who see boundless opportunities like data, AI, and everything things that we talk about. And for those who don't know, Janet actually also sits on the global board of the MMA, so we appreciate her support there, and that's part of the reason why I know her so well.
Well, and Janet, you've been doing a lot of work on data readiness, and I'm curious at a high level. I know the major advance in AI was the transformer, the paper attention is all you need, that really got everything kicked off and moving a lot faster. But that's kind of a general advantage that everybody has today. The competitive advantage seems to be the fine tuning with proprietary data. And you recently quoted an MMA Global study which found that 78% of marketers had challenges with data validation and quality, which is a pretty large roadblock in using AI systems effectively. In fact, I think your quote was, it's a pretty big problem if you're trying to create algorithms and machine learning and AI on top of with AI on top of the data, no one would want to eat food with bad ingredients. I think that's a great quote, and I'm hoping you can tell us more about that.
Well, just think about it. If you imagine you've got the best recipe in the world, and your ingredients are, stale in your refrigerator, or you got them from a bad grocery store. You're not going to get the right result. And so I think it's reasonably ironic that we're all talking about AI and machine learning and predictive analytics and all these very sophisticated techniques around algorithms, and yet when the MMA worked with EY to survey over 100 marketers to look at the state of data maturity, we originally did the study in 2021, and then we revisited it in 2023. And what was super fascinating is that when you looked at the core dimensions of data and data strategy, things have not advanced that much for most of the marketers. And so I think it's kind of alarming. It's a call to action. Actually, only 28% of them had really advanced the data strategy agenda. So I think on top of the data quality issue, which is incredibly universal, which you point out, there's just this overall contradiction, which is you've got people who are saying, I love AI and it's amazing, but they're not focusing on their core ingredients, which are, really important. We've got to make sure we've got the right data sources. And data quality does not have to be perfect. You're not going to get a perfect signal, but it's got to be a good enough signal. Otherwise, the algorithms really don't work. And that speaks to first, second, and third party data. And of course, the mix is changing pretty fundamentally.
So listen, that kind of gives us sort of a problem, then, Jen. So if the foundation is built on a house of sand, which is a variation, another metaphor here versus the food one, which I
we'll go
which
from
I
food
like.
to the beach.
We'll go food to the beach.
Do not put sand in your food. That is not a good thing.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sure that we'll take that metaphor back to the data. So what do you do actually with clients to actually help them get up to speed? What are some of the actions you think that are either, being neglected or not gotten to yet, or just foundational that's going to at least put them in a good position to ultimately use AI going in the future?
Well, I think let's talk about the data quality one for just a moment. I think the first thing is just to make it a priority.
Yeah.
And people generally don't do what they don't measure. So one of the initiatives that we've seen work particularly effectively, and we've got several clients who have really done a formidable job of this, is really measuring data quality. So in most companies, you might have consumer data, or you might have data that describes your products, things that you actually use in your supply chain that you have to actually relate to other sources of data. Or you might look at data, let's say, from your distribution channels, maybe from retailers or wholesalers. And so when you look at those kinds of things, whatever you can do to measure the overall quality and start to publish and share and promote the importance of data quality, that is as important as having, for example, a data governance initiative where you've got a bunch of people who are really focused on the data quality issue. One is making sure people across the broader organization understand the importance of their roles in contributing to data quality. The second piece then is, in fact, making sure that you do have the right data operating model, the right data quality operating model to drive governance, to make sure people are stewards of great data quality. And I think on one of the recent MMA webinars, Charisse Hughes, who is the global chief growth officer for Kellanova, actually pointed out that one of the roles she created to be able to solve this is a data stewardship role. And so that would be another best practice that I think is fundamentally important. But to me, there's this issue of data quality. There's an issue of interoperability, really making sure that you can see the data sources across the organization so you can start to create some fluidity across the data. And then once you've got that sort of all, I'm going to go back to the food analogy, you've got the right ingredients in the pot, then you can start to mix things up and obviously start to create great things, or at least you've got the ingredients, maybe better analogies, on the counter so we can start to cook with it. And I do think that that's an incredibly important part. One of the biggest challenges that sits in so many companies is things are just sitting in a lot of silos. And technology does enable us to see that data in lots of different places where we weren't able to see it before and relate it to each other and find causation, correlation, and obviously to create a lot of value.
Yeah, I think about this, the data quality, as two different problems with the AI generation. And I'm curious to get your take on this. One is the point about validation, which is when you actually look at the data, does it match to your truth set and what you're expecting? And I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about what people should do to look at to assess the quality. And sticking with your food analogy, is there a use by date or something else that tells you whether or not this data is correct and fresh? The other part is AI needs a different structure to the data. It needs XY pairs, and a lot of times people aren't even at that point where they have a structure that will feed into fine tuning for a large language model, for example. So I'm curious about, if you're seeing people tripping up on that second part of structuring the data for generative AI and fine tuning, or if the problem really is just much more fundamental, that they don't even have an ability to check the quality of the data, the freshness, et cetera.
Well, I think you're seeing problems at both ends of the spectrum. So let's talk about some of the things that contribute to data quality. Some of it has to do with accuracy. Is the data sufficiently accurate to drive a valid signal? And you will actually see in a data set that it does not have sufficient accuracy to drive it. Another one is conformity. Do the key data attributes follow enough of a standard format so that I can actually create interoperability across a data set? Or completeness. If I look at the data set, is it complete enough that I can actually analyze it? Or timeliness, is the data, there's your fresh by point, is it updated enough and often enough to be valid? Those are the kinds of things that you're starting to look at when you're looking at quality. And so being able to monitor those things, being able to start to create some habitual behaviors in the organization that focus on that becomes really important. As far as the actual modeling techniques in the data preparedness, I am not going to pretend to be a data scientist here. So I work on the business transformation part of our company, and I closely partner with our data and technology leaders across the organization. But what I would say is, in those partnerships, as we are contemplating a lot of data transformation, the things that I tend to see are a lot of challenges around us. First of all, conflating a lot of different analytical techniques. machine learning, predictive analytics, Gen AI. We use all these words interchangeably. There are a lot of data sets where we have to we do have to structure the data differently. There might be a vectorization technique that needs to be applied to something or not applied to something. I mean, there's a lot that needs to be done. And then there are other techniques where we can actually use incredibly unstructured data to be able to derive insights. I think it's about matching the insights modeling approach to the data set that is available. And I'm putting this in layperson's terms, not for you, but for me, and maybe for some of those folks who are listening. And I think not trying to assume that it is a one size fits all. And that's where a lot of the sophistication of our technology teams comes to play. And again, I would not certainly pretend to represent that end of that part of our organization. That's also where a lot of the partnership with many of our alliance partners comes into play when we sit by side, for example, with Microsoft, who's a major alliance partner for EY. That's an example among many, of the important players or a handful of important players that we might spend, incredibly precious time really thinking about the particularly important decisions that need to be made. But there is not one methodology that's going to work across every company.
So Janet, did it also too, from the study that we had jointly done together, didn't we kind of find that data maturity hadn't really moved was it at any significant level? Like, and we're 2 years, so
No.
we did first in 2021, then 2023.
Yeah, that's what I was referencing before. It was like on every dimension. It was rather disappointing. But what
Yeah.
was fascinating, Greg,
Yeah.
was if you looked at the pack that had distinguished itself from the rest, the leaders,
Yeah.
they were making markedly different decisions
Oh,
in
okay.
how they were using the data. So, for example, the use cases that they were using the data to create value. For example, if you look at the kinds of things, a basic use case might be targeting, and a more advanced use case might be lookalike modeling, or a basic use case might be journey orchestration. But these guys are actually focused on much more sophisticated uses around recommendations. And by the way, it corresponds with the kinds of KPIs that they're looking at. So the leaders have moved away, for example, from thinking about things like return on ad spend and simple mass reach as vehicles that make sense, and they are disproportionately doubling down on. And I'm talking about the leaders. The leaders are disproportionately saying, "Well, I actually need top of funnel and bottom funnel metrics, and I need a balance of short." And long term metrics. And one of the longer term metrics that they were looking at was customer lifetime value. Well, if you're going to look at customer lifetime value in addition to brand sentiment, in addition to conversion, more performance orientation, maybe short term sales, if you're going to get to customer lifetime value, well, how do you orchestrate that? It's through very sophisticated orchestration of what people may want to buy. And so that's where those recommendations come into play. Another great example is the more advanced leaders were actually looking at things like omni-channel purchase behavior, and they were really using the data in a very sophisticated way, not to say omni-channel, it's happening everywhere all at once. That's a movie. That's not actually a consumer behavior. Everything everywhere, whatever that. Anyway, amazing film. But anyway, or at least the Academy thinks so. So if you think about that, to me that really signifies I need to be incredibly sophisticated in managing a very nonlinear journey for humans, and that's going to take a lot of data to be able to appreciate what's happening in a physical retail environment or a digital retail environment, or none of the above. So these are the kinds of things that are being unlocked for the minority of the companies that are really advancing the data agenda. And as you pointed out, that is disappointing to see that it is a minority of companies out there.
Okay, but the better, or so at the conclusion in some regards, the better are getting much better, and the average is, well, we got a lot of work to do, everybody.
They may have moved on to a lot of buzzwords around AI and what they can do with all this data, but they're not actually doing the fundamental things they need to really get their data quality where it needs to be, to make sure their data foundation is solid. That means the technology to support
Yeah.
interoperability across the organization, to make sure their data governance is where it needs to be, that they have the right operating model to support it. And I realize that probably sounds like pretty geeky consulting speak, but when you're dealing with very at scale, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 global companies with different, privacy regulations in every country and jurisdiction in the world. There's a lot of sophistication that needs to be exerted upon the model to do this exceptionally well, and yet to also be able to bring global scale to the model and to create that value.
Yeah, it sounds like as you're talking about it and unpacking the use cases that a data set, you need to have an identifier back to the person that you think you're connecting with, the household, the whatever grain you're looking at. You need to have the timestamps of the journey and the touch points, as you were talking about the orchestration. You need to have what products or SKUs that they've bought and the connection back to that catalog. And you need a linkage back to the message or the digital asset management of what people were exposed to and the features within those messages. Are there other pieces that I've missed there that you would add to it, or is that kind of the block of what what listeners need to be building? Is there a checklist? Is there something that makes it easier to see what's kind of that core basics that you need?
Look, I think I would actually make it really simple. It's right message, right human, right time, right environment, and it has to be relevant. I think that how we create that relevance is really complicated or really simple right now. I actually think there's probably been an over indexing on the word personalization recently. By the way, it's not a bad word, but I think we have to interpret it appropriately. We have to be really nuanced. So I think with all the advent of the technology that has become available to us, we got really excited about the possibilities at the infinite end of the spectrum. One-to-one hyper personalization. We all started hearing these words in the marketplace. What I worry about a little bit, there is no client I have seen who can do one-to-one hyper personalization. They don't have the creative, the data, or the technology or the executional capacity to be able to execute that. And by the way, even in a world of AI, I don't foresee that, for years to come. Eventually, yes, hypothetically, it is possible because generative AI could create enough creative permutations. We could create enough analysis that, sure, in theory, if you really wanted to let machines rule the world, you could get there. But I don't know. First of all, I think there are diminishing returns on personalization, and so I think we have to think about things like personalization at scale. And the thing that I think is underappreciated is that it's not a marketer working in a vacuum. It's not a marketer just optimizing their own data and their own experience. They are using their own data sources and their own models in concert with agencies who, for the vast majority of the marketers we could have a conversation about who are operating businesses at scale, they're working with either very large scale holding companies or very interesting disruptive players in that space. But the majority are working with the large scale holding companies. And increasingly, they're working with very robust capabilities of some of the biggest media companies in the world. It's that triangulated ecosystem that we have to consider. And then let's layer on all of the data and AI that is resident and all the analytics that sit inside of any of the platforms that they may be using across their paid, owned, and earned media. And so to me, I think on the one hand, I could say it's very simple: right message, right time, right place, right, et cetera. Let's get all that right to the right human. But on the other side, we're dealing with a very complex ecosystem where everyone's bringing data, everyone's bringing more interesting analytics and AI than ever before. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done to truly reconcile it so that you don't pass the point of diminishing returns. And so things are actually wired so that they become accretive to each other. In other words, the client modeling and the agency modeling are productively working together, or the client, the agency, and the media company's models are working together. And we're not just selling in transactional ways to each other, because that's how a lot of the industry was originally formed, which is sort of hand-to-hand combat, one salesperson to one buyer, and that's not the way that we're moving over time.
Hey, Jenna, let's go back though to a thesis that I think I've heard you articulate that you really do believe CM. I mean, listen, you'd kind of think if data maturity is not there, if we're not really advanced the ball, then should CMO still even sort of be responsible? And so, but you do have a thesis that you think they have an important seat at the table or in the dialogue around AI. You want to explain that from your perspective and experience?
Sure. Well, a lot of what I was just referencing probably has to do a lot with media strategy and marketing strategy, but I absolutely think CMOs play a tremendous role in their companies around AI, and there's some natural reasons why CMOs have a prime seat in the dialogue in the C-suite. First and foremost, AI is a natural extension of a digital and data transformation that CMOs have been leading for years. So AI is not an initiative unto itself. AI is an extension of the data and digital transformation. And by the way, for CMOs of most companies of scale, they have been leading that data and digital transformation in conjunction with their CIO and their CTO, with their CFO and the rest of the C suite. And they're really collaborating with a lot of the other functional leaders, whether it's supply chain or sales, thinking about a host of other functional silos that really do need to come together in that transformation because the data has to relate to drive business value. The second reason the CMOs, I think, have a prime seat at the table is think about any emerging technology. When we all started yakking about the metaverse, who was doing the yakking in most companies? Probably a CMO, right? Because a lot of emerging technology, a lot of the curiosity, it sits with CMOs. Web3, same thing. So I think when things are in the zeitgeist in either a B2C or a B2B context, it is natural that people in most companies do turn to the CMO and say, talk to me about this. I think another reason CMOs are keenly interested in this particular topic is if you look at the research, we just did research with a bunch of C suite executives going into our innovation summit. We did this in 6 cities around the world. And what was striking about the data was that 49% of the functions that were anticipated to be disrupted were in either sales or marketing, and it was a
Yeah.
long distance to the next highest function, which was
Yeah.
R&D. Which means if commercial functions are going to be disrupted, CMOs are also worried, like, how is this going to impact me and my people?
Yeah.
So I think there's a real value in having a CMO drive a big chunk of this dialogue because they've got a lot of experience in thinking about how the enterprise will be impacted by this particular
Right.
innovation.
Funny enough, I think you just said that they both see the future and they're standing in the center of the road, is what I think you just said, actually, in summary.
Absolutely. They are. And I think, by the way,
So what truck is coming
yeah,
coming to run
well,
them down
yeah.
first?
Yeah,
Is that
So
what's the size of the
that's my
vehicle
question.
roaring
Out
down
of
that
those
superhighway of
49%,
AI?
yeah, yeah.
I
What's
love that.
no, I mean, seriously though, what do you think is the first semi truck that? I mean,
It's
that was
not
very
losing
similar to the
jobs.
research we did. Was about 50%.
It's not.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not
I don't
losing
think people are
jobs.
Yeah,
going
so
to
so
see a
let me
job
just tell
listing
you, like,
either.
losing jobs is not the truck coming down the road,
Yeah.
okay? And I'll
Done.
tell you why. It's the same thing that was
Agreed.
happening in automation. It takes a part of your job and makes it better. Like, it's usually, by the way, the part of your job you don't like, right? So it's the part that takes a lot of time. For example, generative AI is doing for a lot of different things is it is making things more efficient, more productive.
Yeah.
I can summarize things more easily. I
Yes.
can go from text to image. I can go from text to video. I can translate languages, perhaps. Whatever it is, it's not like that was a job. That's not a title in a company, most of
Yeah.
these generative AI use cases. It's a part of somebody's job. So the truck is not jobs for now. I do have a perspective that 5, 8, 10 years from now, the entire shape of the company will transform because things can connect differently. In which case, I think the company can work more efficiently. That's not a threat to marketing. That's a threat to the overall enterprise and an opportunity for it to make business decisions more effectively. And that probably does involve over the longer haul fewer humans, but that is a very long bet, and only for those that really double down on, again, this data transformation that enables that level of AI sophistication. But if we go to the opportunity, it is an opportunity to unlock creativity. It's an opportunity to do things like, there are lots of companies. Let's take a traditional consumer packaged goods company. They have to do a lot of very tactical things, not only around media, but let's say the landing page is sitting on an e-commerce site, a third-party e-commerce site, some big ones, I won't name them, We may have some audit relationships that would preclude me from naming them, but those sites where we might buy a lot of things, like their product detail pages that need to be very frequently updated so that the customer journey is whole. That's a lot of content that needs to be generated. It's not super fun, just like, trying to do search content, like text stuff is not like the most joyful, like creative work on planet Earth. So there is an opportunity to start thinking about, in those examples, how do we start doing that more efficiently, as part of our workflows, doing part of our job,
Yeah.
with some of that new technology. It's just an example.
Yeah, the best stat I heard the other day is that employees spend at least 2 hours a day searching for what they need just to do their job. Like, really? Like, nobody's going to be upset about giving that up. I think we've come to sort of accept that, too, as a part of what we do, and it's ridiculous. So one of the things we should fix, somebody, please.
Well, and think about.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
I think the job. Oh, go, oh, no, go for
I
it.
was going to say, the other thing that also interests me is, like, we should be listening. We always say customer centricity, but we don't have the time to actually at scale go through all the product reviews or customer sentiment analysis. Like, really, like,
Yeah.
like, do we actually internalize it? So
Yeah.
when we're doing creative, are we in the zeitgeist at that moment saying, what are people saying about my brand or my product at this second? Well, guess what? Now we really probably can a lot more efficiently. So one of the most important use cases I think we should be taking advantage of is not to go do our job, but just to make our job smarter, which is, let's put ourselves in the mindset of the customer, go into particular sources and use this as an opportunity to summarize, because summarization is something that I think Gen AI is particularly good at right now. We're not going to try to write copy using it, but is it an opportunity? Like, you can, but I'm just saying right now, just taking something that is pretty low risk, just use it to give me insight. I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and building on that, I mean, knowledge management is such a big area where AI is a very fast win. I mean, vector databases, put all your content in there, and we're doing that for the show, right? We're putting all the transcripts into an AI so people can interact with you and ask questions that to see how you might have answered. I
great.
guess we'll see how that goes, but within that, how have you seen the inside of EY change? Are you seeing a knowledge management initiative where you're using AI to make that function easier?
We actually
Or is it a situation of the cobbler has no shoes?
No,
So
we actually walk the walk. So we've actually launched our own generative AI initiative focused on knowledge management. As you can imagine, we use a lot of PowerPoint because it is, of course, everyone's happy place. Isn't it your happy place? Don't you need more PowerPoint in the world?
I love
Yes.
PowerPoint. I really do.
Oh, I know, Greg. I know you do. I've seen
You see?
evidence of this. Uh,
It's like an affliction
but
with me. Go
it's all
ahead.
right. We can cure you. We can cure
No,
you.
there is no
Um,
recovery.
but but
Go ahead.
in the off chance that a lot of intellectual property in most companies sits in PowerPoint slides, hypothetically speaking, it certainly in a company like UI, there's a lot of very material methodology that really sits in PowerPoints. And as we prepare to bring our best thinking together, from our toolkit, our vast toolkits and methodologies and work deliverables, it's a tremendous opportunity for us to be able to not just, there's a difference between like search and find, and sort of that behavior. And this is a really dramatic elevation to be able to use this in the context of generative AI to be able to say, how do I construct a starting point for a presentation that has the right prompt? And so we're actually, we just rolled that out in the last several weeks, actually. And we're going to keep testing and learning and testing and learning and trying lots of different things. But it's incredibly exciting as we move forward with that.
Hey, Jenny, you kind of referenced early to a global approach to data management, and I honestly hadn't really, it's hard enough to do in one country, let alone everywhere. And I happen to be doing this podcast from Vietnam right now and sort of exploring. I mean, they're fairly lit up with data. I'm kind of surprised at how evolved what is an otherwise more recent marketplace develop here. What do you, talk to a little bit more about what you mean when you say having to manage that globally. I mean, we just took hard and made it really hard by doing that, right? That's necessary, essential. Get to it later. I don't know. How do you manage global? We're on data and then AI.
Yeah. Well, we think a lot about the operating model conundrum and in global companies. And one of the things I would say is people fixate way too much on the notion of what should be centralized versus decentralized.
Mm,
They focus a lot on the org chart.
yeah.
And I always encourage people stop thinking about the org chart. Think about the notion of what needs to be market up and that is uniquely local. Things like how do you drive cultural relevance? What relationships do we need to manage on the ground? What is it that is going to be in the ecosystem that is uniquely in that market? For example, what are the who are the media partners that can only be accessed in Vietnam, where you are, Greg, and what is the data and regulatory environment that you have?
Right.
On the other hand, and equally important, what are the global frameworks that we need to think about? What are the globally scaled opportunities that we can think about? Whether it's tools, whether it's data quality initiatives, whether it's methodologies, whether it's playbooks for excellence. What are the things that we can drive across an organization that allow us to provide more access to more capabilities across more geographies that are globally scaled? To me, process can be global, not because it's harmonized and standardized, because no one in no place anywhere said they wanted to be harmonized and governed, at least that I know in a company. But people do want value, they do want access, they do want acceleration, and I think so. When you put that benefit mindset at the core of your thinking, the global value proposition can be really powerful.
Okay. I think we heard the quote of the day there, right? That no one nowhere wants to be harmonized. I got it, Jack.
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah,
governed.
no, like, I mean,
Yes.
if a consultant walks in and says, let's drive consistency and standardization and harmonization, that's probably at the point where adoption dropped to zero, right? So I mean, that's just practical human behavior, right? We have to think through the lens, and we really think at EY about the notion of human centricity. If you can use all the technology in the world, but if we cannot maintain a human centric mindset, we will fail epically in anything we do, no matter how much technology we use. It has to dovetail with human behavior, otherwise we fail.
Wow.
Well, with that, I think it's a great time to transition to our lightning round.
Ooh, lightning
We
round.
like to end with a few questions. And the first one is, what do you think is the most overhyped part of
Yeah,
AI
what's silly
today?
out there, Janet? You want to call BS on anything or caution or?
I think the biggest caution is probably just not to conflate AI with Gen AI. They're
Mm,
two totally different, not two totally different things. They both have the letters AI in them. But I would just say, AI has been around since the 1940s. Machine learning, deep learning, these things have all been evolving. Gen AI is a tipping point that, emerged on the popular scene with ChatGPT as of November 2022. And it made people very aware of the broader AI phenomena. But it does something different than AI, and we should be aware that one is an on ramp to many of the capabilities of the other, but AI is a much broader category.
okay. So based on what you see,
And what do you
oh,
think's
go
the
ahead, Max.
most?
Yeah, you got it. Go do it.
Oh, I'm sorry. What's the most underappreciated thing you're seeing in marketing and AI?
Yeah, what are we missing an opportunity around that you think we should lean into more? I'd be curious to know in your perspective. By the way, we'll ask you this question a year from now too, and see how different it is. By the way, I expect, but
I think that right now it's still early days
yeah,
in generative AI, and so
yeah,
honestly, the most underappreciated thing is the need to jump in, right? To For everyone to actually go do it,
yeah.
meaning themselves personally, for them to find a way to experiment, whether it's in a function, whether it's as part of people's jobs, whether it's to set up an engine room, whether it's to set up proofs of concept. It doesn't have to be at scale right this minute. That's okay, right? I think people can give themselves permission,
Yeah.
but to not be doing anything, that is something that I do not think people can afford to do, because then you will be left behind. It has to be built into the culture. It has to be built into this notion of continuous learning and innovation, and that requires us to jump in every day and read about it every day, practice it every day, play with it. Otherwise, and I don't mean play with it mindlessly, but purposefully. But it is like a lot of technology, these are hands-on activities, and I think that that's incredibly important.
Yeah, I also kind of figured too, we haven't really found, we had that call, it came up on a global board call the other day. Like, we haven't really found, I don't think we found the really true killer app. ChatGPT is really interesting, but it doesn't feel, it's not like, Uber is really what made the mobile phone unbelievably accelerated in the experience. And they didn't start until 2 years after the iPhone. So, I still think we got a little bit of time to go here before we see really special. That's my guess.
Yeah, look, I would encourage people who haven't had a chance to read it. Sequoia put out
Yeah.
the Act Two thought leadership piece, and I think it's really powerful. There are a number of apps that they highlight there. I won't list them all now. Whether it's copy generation, image generation, campaign generation, they list some of the ones that they're keeping an eye on, and I think it's a great place to start in terms of something tangible you can go do right now. A, read the article. B, go check out the demos of those products. C, maybe think about which of those you actually might want to deploy as things you're testing and learning around somewhere in your marketing organization. Those are all places to start. But I love that they have sort of their own Loomascape. You're welcome, Terry. It's now its own noun. But of the apps that they're following over at Sequoia. And I think it's a great list. And there's a specific section focused on marketing. And I think that's a great list to be focused on, because I do think there's some general apps that are universal that you can use across different functional areas. And then there are going to be some that are going to be very vertically and niche specific. And you're going to want to take a look at both. And like any emerging technology space, I promise you the logos are going to change constantly.
Yeah, and I think, Rex, what do you think? With that, that's about as good a direction as we could give to an individual to take a next step forward, right?
I think that's a great point to end it on. And I know, this has been a
Very
great
good.
conversation.
Yeah.
Appreciate you coming on the show and sharing this
Yeah,
with
most in
us.
depth we've
Such
had,
a pleasure.
Janet. It's great as always. Thank you. You're the best.
Thank you.